That's the moment I realized he was trying to kidnap the baby. Have you got any true stories that are so crazy that someday when you tell them to your grandchildren, they'll probably think you're exaggerating? But this is no big fish story. I'm about to tell you something that really happened to me with no embellishments. Just the facts as they happened. Allow me to set the stage. When I was 15, my family moved to a new town. Our new next door neighbor was a single mom. I'll call her Susan. And that summer, she needed a nanny for her 5-year-old daughter and 9-month-old baby girl. Enter me. I had feet back then, so it worked better. Now, I didn't know Susan's full backstory, but I'd been informed of one important detail. Her ex was dangerous. There was a protective order in place, and if anyone matching his description showed up, I needed to call Susan and the police ASAP. That's a comforting getting to know you speech. The summer moseyed along. All day, Monday through Friday, 15-year-old me got a heaping preview of what parenthood would be like. Turns out that kids are high-maintenance pets. So was her puppy, but that's okay because both the kids and the puppy were very cute. And I was happy that I could help out a single mom. One day I was helping the 5-year-old get in the bathtub. The baby was up and the puppy was running around being adorable. There was a knock on the door. It was a solid wooden door, so I couldn't see who was on the other side. I can't remember if I thought it was the package being delivered or a neighbor swinging by, but I definitely didn't foresee who it turned out to be. I undid the bolt and opened the door. A man was standing there. He was tall, with the build of a football player. His hands were shaking. I'm not sure if it was from drugs or emotions, but it was scary. More alarming still was the intense expression on his face. They say that most communication is nonverbal, and I can tell you, this guy's body language was screaming that he meant business and was not afraid of hurting people to get what he wanted. Before he'd even opened his mouth, an overwhelming sense of danger and impending violence washed over me. His foot darted onto the threshold, preventing me from shutting the door. Oh, and I forgot to mention, during all this, I was holding the baby. So here I was, 15 years old, no cell phone, a baby in my arms. Holding the squirming 9-month-old, I didn't have both hands at my disposal. I couldn't move freely, and I certainly couldn't let the baby get hurt. And let's not forget, the 5-year-old still blissfully unaware she splashed in the bathtub. This was before I'd started martial arts. I had no skills, no one to help, no clue what to do. I was just a lone kid holding a baby with a threatening stranger at the door. Except he wasn't a stranger, not exactly. He was the baby's biological father. He looked at me, his hands shaking worse than ever, and spoke in a tone of barely controlled emotion.
"That is my baby. Give her to me."
That's the moment I realized he was trying to kidnap the baby, and she was in my arms. I didn't know his backstory, but I'd been told that legally he could not step foot on the property and that he wasn't allowed anywhere near the kids because he was very dangerous. I looked at him and was again impressed with an overwhelming sense of violence. Everything from his expression to the way he was blocking the door to how violently his hands shook made me feel like I was in mortal danger, and the baby even more so. And remember, this was a tall, broad, strong man, and I was a short teenage girl holding a baby. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This guy's taking the baby over my dead body. He pushed against the door, starting to force his way in. So I did what anyone would do. I asked for his ID. He looked a little surprised, and I think that worked in my favor because my response was probably the one reaction he didn't see coming. He stopped shoving the door and just stared at me, bewildered. The puppy, a mini schnauzer, wandered out to sniff at his shoes. The man asked,
"What do you mean?"
I replied, "If you really are her father, you wouldn't want me to hand over your baby to some random man I've never seen before, would you? I mean, wouldn't you want me to make sure you really are her dad?" So yeah, I basically explained to the kidnapper that we wouldn't want the baby to get kidnapped, now would we? Life's full of irony. How I managed to say any of that to him without sounding terrified, I don't know. It was nothing like how in movies, sometimes a protagonist will cleverly outsmart a villain. This wasn't fun and games. This was real, and I could tell from his body language that if I said one wrong thing, he could get violent just like that. Something I've learned about myself is that when I'm in danger, my emotions shut off, and I go into a hyper-focused, very analytical state. I've had a handful of experiences in my life where I was in grave danger. Each time I became very practical, very matter-of-fact, which is a blessing because that's exactly what I needed in that moment, with this man trying to force his way in to take the baby. I believe that if I'd acted scared or defensive, he would have snapped. But because my voice was calm and I asked for his ID in a business-like tone, almost like a cashier making sure a customer is old enough to buy fireworks, it didn't trigger a violent reaction in him. He put his hand in his pocket and started fishing out his wallet, all the time keeping his foot in the door so I couldn't shut it. At that point, I didn't even try to shut the door. I was waiting for the right opportunity and didn't dare do anything that would put him on his guard. I kept my free hand on the door, my body bracing it to prevent him from opening it any further. I watched, hardly blinking, waiting for the slightest opening. The baby wiggled in my arms, playing with my hair, making baby noises. The 5-year-old sang in the bathtub, and the puppy kept wandering in and out the door. Hands still shaking, the stranger handed me his ID. I held it in a way that I could read it, while still keeping an eye on him. I remember thinking, quite rationally, that I wanted to be able to testify to the police exactly who had come to take the baby, not just a mere guess. I mean, a standard policy to ID would-be kidnappers, right? I said, "Well, I recognize your name. Looks like you really are the father." He relaxed ever so slightly, probably pleased that this stupid teenage babysitter wasn't going to make trouble. I handed back his ID. He took it, shifting position as he fiddled with his wallet. Unconsciously, his foot scooted back a few inches away from the threshold. I slammed the door. I've never deadbolted a door so fast in my life. I could hear him shouting, saying I'd killed the dog as I ran for the back door and checked the lock. I grabbed the phone and dashed to the bathroom. I shut the door, locking it, wanting as many locks as possible between me and that man. Now it was my turn for my hands to shake. Holding the phone in tremulous hands, I began dialing. Fun fact, this house was next door to the police station, as in right next door. How long do you think it took the police to rush over when they heard that a man was trying to kidnap a baby from a 15-year-old babysitter? Not long at all. Still, by then the father was long gone. As soon as I got away, he was out of there. Those few minutes between when he left and when the police arrived felt like an eternity. Barricaded in the bathroom with a baby and a 5-year-old, my mind was racing on how I would protect them if he circled around and tried to force his way in through a window. Outside, the puppy whimpered. He'd gotten hit by the door when I slammed it and was still on the porch. I felt so bad, not knowing whether that tiny puppy would die. How I wished he hadn't wandered in front of the door at the worst possible moment. The police showed up, as did the mother, Susan. And if you've never seen a mother who realizes her children are in mortal danger, well, I just hope you never have cause to witness something like that. The police asked me to recount everything. When I got to the part where I related how I'd asked for the guy's ID, the officer did a double take.
You asked for his ID?
Well, yeah. I still don't know what made me do it. But I'd like to think that there's a God in heaven who sometimes gives us direction when we really need it. And if we actually listen to those thoughts, things go better. I had to protect that baby. Physically, I was completely outmatched. At the time, and even now a couple decades later, I'm convinced that some divine intervention helped me know what to do. At any rate, after the police were done with me, I went home and wrote down everything, then put it in an envelope, sealed it, signed it, and dated the seal. I figured that this was going to end up in a courtroom, and I wanted to record the details while they were fresh, and also make sure those details were dated, so it'd be clear that I hadn't altered my testimony. I didn't know it at the time, but only a small fraction of child abductions are committed by strangers. Usually, it's a family member or someone else the child knows. I'm not an expert, I'm just relating my personal experience. and trying to bring awareness to this subject. If you'd like to donate to help missing children, I'll find some links and put them in the description. The whole affair did indeed end up in court. It was a novel experience the day I found myself in the courtroom. Looking back, it's still surreal that all this happened to me. I'll totally understand if my future grandkids think I made the whole thing up. I mean, we never think this sort of thing is going to happen to us. I mean, maybe to somebody else, but definitely not to us. We're not going to go head to head with kidnappers, have our limbs chopped off, or get disabled. And yet, these things do happen. And if they're going to happen, then obviously they're going to happen to somebody. And there's no reason why I would be immune to the curveballs life so often throws. On the bright side, the baby was safe. The little girl was safe, and the mother was able to move to a town where she felt safer and had family she trusted to help her and her kids. Even the tiny puppy was okay, no broken bones or anything, which was a relief. And in a random plot twist, when Susan moved out, my family decided to move next door, which was bizarre, living in a place where I used to work and had faced a kidnapper. Only now the house is gone. It got knocked down and a massive hotel was built in its place. Life is weird sometimes. Anyhow, I'm Stephanina. Thank you for joining me on my adventures. If you'd like to hear more crazy stories, here's a playlist, including when I broke both hands, or also the time when I jumped out of a wheelchair pelting down a mountain going 30 miles an hour. True story. I'm pretty sure it also makes a list of stories my grandkids will never believe.